Hi, and meet my beautiful queen elderberry tree. I'm so in love with this tree. I got a story for you about it, but also I want to let you know that this tree is a native tree that grows wild all around here, but I planted this one and it's part of my strategy for feeding myself from the land and keeping the land wild and having an easier life. Because when I first moved here, I am in the wilderness, off grid. As you can see, it's very wild here. And I tried planting a number of fruit trees and they just got devoured by wildlife, and I fenced them and I fought, and then I was like, God, I know you did not intend for humans to struggle this hard to feed themselves. And what did the natives do? You know, they didn't have all these cages, and I don't believe they were at constant war with the wildlife to get their food. And that's when I got turned on to using wild native food producing plants that just grow on their own in the wilderness. And so elderberries are fabulous because they boost your immune system. A lot of people have keyed into that now, how powerful antioxidant properties they have. But you can also make jams and jellies and pies. And I actually collect the berries and dehydrate them, and then I grind them up and put them in water with a little stevia, or you can use other sweetener, and it's like Kool-Aid. It's easy. So that's how I store mine. I dehydrate them in my solar dehydrator. But I'm planting these all over my mountain. Not only do they feed me, but they feed the wildlife as well, and they're super hardy. I'm going to tell you a story about that in just a second. But a few years ago, I harvested berries from a tree that was just growing wild up in the mountains. And in a really short amount of time, like I'm thinking like 10 minutes, I had a whole box full of berries. It was just loaded and they were all over everywhere. It's amazing. So that's one of the many native plants I'm planting on my property to feed me, because basically I just need to get them started and then they will take over on their own. Easier life for me, lots of food for me, no fighting the wildlife. And one of the reasons I'm not fighting the wildlife is because when I first planted this tree here, I planted it in the summer and I was watering it and it wasn't doing very well, and then the leaves started curling up and I was like, what's going on here? And I kept watering it, and my friend's like, it has a disease. And I'm like, I don't know. So I sat and I meditated with it. And what came to me was that I needed to stop watering this tree. And that made no sense to me whatsoever. But I said, okay. So I stopped watering it, and then boom, it took off beautifully. And I was like, wow. And I put a cage around it to keep my goats from destroying it. But they lifted the cage and completely destroyed it. There was not a trace left except for a few tiny little branches sticking out of the ground. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And then it came back. It came back beautifully. And then I fortified the fence even more, and then the goats lifted that cage and destroyed it again, all the way down to the ground. So twice this tree has been completely destroyed. And then it came back, but this time it came back and it grew 7 feet tall from the ground, from nothing to 7 feet tall in one season without irrigation. So this is my queen. I am so in love with this tree. She is a badass, and that's the kind of stuff I'm all about. Wild and badass and abundant. And pretty soon she's going to start putting out all kinds of beautiful smelling flowers. Oh, I love the way they smell. And so these are great trees because they can handle, like if deer eat them or whatever wildlife eat them, they'll come back. Now, one thing I have noticed is that the one I planted in the clay soil is doing far better than some of the wild ones I've seen that are growing in like dry creek beds where it's sandy, because unless there's, a good rain year, the soil just drains too quickly. I surround the young trees with branches to keep the goats off of them and rabbits and other critters, which is not a perfect system, but it does work really well. And the shade that the branches provide helps with water retention so that they establish quicker.